Jamie, what a privilege it is to have you here on the RevRx podcast. I shared with you a little bit before offhand, but my wife and I are really thrilled to be able to pick your brain on this episode. I have some questions from her.
Well, it is a joy to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. And please thank her for dropping my name into your lap.
Sure, sure. You're doing important work. Family work is important work. And I'm more and more convinced the more that I do this that family matters to God. And we live in a world that isn't always conducive to families thriving. So I'm excited to get into your work. But before we jump into your actual work, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to our audience. Help us to get to know you a little better. I know you're from Minnesota. We talked about that, but give us a little bit of a glimpse into your life and kind of where you are in life today.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback on what you said, I think family is really important to the enemy too. He knows that's
Absolutely.
exactly where he can get us. So this is important work that you are doing as well. I am Jamie Erickson. I am a homeschooling mother of 5. My husband and I have been married for 23 years. We have launched our first 2 kids. They're out in the world doing exactly what God created them to do. And it is such a thrill to see them thriving, doing
Awesome.
his work. And we still have 3 at home. We have a senior, a junior, and an 8th grader yet at home. I actually was a teacher in the classroom for about 7 years before having my first baby. And my husband had been homeschooled for most of his middle school on up. And I never thought I would homeschool, but, as scripture says, we can plan our ways, but the Lord really does order our steps. And so
Amen.
here I am homeschooling. We've been doing it since the very beginning. And I think this is our 18th year.
Lots of lessons learned in that, I'm sure. Maybe we'll get into some of that.
Yeah.
And you're an author as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I had been writing online. I've always loved to write since I was a little girl, and writing is very cathartic for me. And as I was writing, back in the days of blogging, just writing about our lives, most of what I wrote about at that time was about homeschooling because that was, we were in the thick of that, and that was top of mind. And I kind of gathered some allies around me, other moms who were homeschooling or just starting out, hoping to homeschool, and began nurturing that conversation. And through that, I was able to write a book called Homeschool Bravely, which is kind of my love letter to homeschooling mothers who, we carry not just the weight of our children's lives on our shoulders, but also their education, which adds another layer of pressure to a homeschool mom. And so many women just really wonder if they're doing it right, if they're doing it well. Women, I think in general, have a lifelong relationship with self-doubt.
Sure.
And then you add on this very large responsibility of education, and it just compounds. And I wanted to write a love letter to homeschool moms or moms thinking about homeschooling, just to remind them that, God will call you to homeschool, not because he thinks you are able, but because he knows he is able.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. And then you've also written another one, Overwhelmed Moms.
Yeah,
and that
that's
one
actually my 3rd book.
Probably hits a lot of us. But walk us through what's your second one, and then let's talk about that one too.
Well, my second one was called Holy Hygge, and it kind of marries this Danish concept. My husband is Danish and Norwegian, and I am not. And I'm originally from Phoenix, and when I moved from Phoenix to central Minnesota, where he and his family are from, I was really cocooned in this lovely lifestyle that the Danes have called Hygge. And as with many things, the world really wants to take what God called good and sort of hijack it for their own purposes.
Yeah.
And I really began to see, and it was very compelling to me, some of the elements of Hygge that sort of engenders feelings of coziness and contentment, all the things that it's the world of Instagram, all the things that make us feel so cozy and family oriented. I began to see a lot of parallels between that lifestyle and actually the abundant life that we have in Christ.
Yeah.
And even more so, I saw how Hygge was kind of only a temporary Band-Aid for the ache that the world has. And I wanted to take this really popular concept that so many were grasping onto and hearing about here in the United States, and show how really, if you want that contentment and that coziness and that sanctuary lifestyle that we even see in the garden. Well, what you really need is Jesus. So it's a book about hospitality, about swinging your doors wide in order to invite others in so that they can meet the one who is our promised land on
Wow.
this side of the garden. So that was my second book. And then my third book just released last fall, and it's called Overwhelmed Mom. And that book, I guess I'm a firm believer that God will never give me a message to write that he doesn't want me to live. And I feel like I've lived that book and then some. So it's just, I'm holding out whatever he's taught me in hopes that it might be helpful to somebody else.
Love it. I love your journey, and I love how you write about it and you encourage others through it. I haven't read your second book, and I'm really interested to get that because I'm kind of similar in my approach. So it's this concept of you think that you're longing for this, but really what you're longing for is Christ. And
right. Yes.
And I absolutely love that. And a lot of times, this kind of symptoms of a greater need, and I resonate with that very strongly.
Yeah. And I think the world does too. I mean, especially in our post-COVID world of trying to find handholds to come out of the isolation that we all felt. And we feel like we're such a connected community. And yet, science research shows us that most people really struggle to name two people that they would consider really good close friends or community. And I think that's the itch that I was hoping to scratch when I wrote that book.
Well, it's kind of the blessing and the curse, and this is a different conversation for a different day, but while we're talking about it, kind of the blessing and the curse of technology, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're the most connected generation ever, but we're the loneliest generation ever, according to some of the psychology research out there. So absolutely, yeah, it points us to that greater need, and that greater need is a person, not a thing. And so, well, that's fascinating. And you spoke of this longing, and I think that's a good segue into Overwhelmed Mom. Now, I want to put a disclaimer in here. I'm obviously not a mom. Today, maybe I need to say that, but I'm not a mom, and I realize maybe a lot of my listeners out there are not moms. Okay. However, it takes two to make a family work.
That's right.
And so I want to speak to the moms through this message today, and I also want to speak to the dads out there. And so I want to approach this from two different ways. I want to see what your message is to moms that are feeling that overwhelm. And then I want to speak also to the men out there. How can we be better supportive husbands? How can we support those how can we support our spouses who are undergoing this overwhelm? Oh, you hear that?
No.
I don't know what that was. All right, hold on. It's like
I hear it now, a little squeak.
Yeah, okay. All right, anyway.
Okay.
I'll edit that out. And so when we think about overwhelm, I told you my wife, she really resonates with that message. She resonates with the concept of being overwhelmed because there's this real. It's kind of a catch-22 in our world today. One of the things that she shares with me, and I think she would share this if she was with us, is that she felt this need that society was kind of pushing her towards being a strong, independent woman. You need to go to college, you need to obtain a degree, you need to obtain a career, and that's the way that she went because that's just kind of what most people did growing up. I'll also add she was homeschooled as well, and so there's that concept too. We resonate with your message. But then it almost seems like the world is not set up for both parents to be full-time working parents. I don't know if maybe you've experienced that either personally or with some people that you've come across, but thinking about like when kids get out of school, we're both in a workplace until 4 or 5 o'clock. Well, the kids get out before then. So what do we do with that? There's just several examples that we've come across lately that seems like her heart is just kind of saying, I wish I was at home. What is your thought process through that? Thinking about both families working in that tension, or both parents working in that tension that the mom feels, that tension that the mom feels about, I can't be everything to everybody, and I'm just feeling really, really spread thin.
Thank you for sharing your story. I don't think it's the anomaly of stories. I think that that is something that so many women right now in our current culture are struggling with. I don't believe that our society is set up. I won't say it's not set up for a two-income household. I actually think that's the way our society is set up right now.
Yeah.
But I do think it's not set up to allow a mother to thrive in the areas that God calls us to. You know, God calls us to be keepers of the home. Now, hear me, I'm not saying that a woman can't work outside the home. I did that myself for a time. But that our highest priorities and goals need to be geared toward the home, and that nothing that we do outside the home should detract from what we do in the home. And I think that our culture is not designed to come alongside women in those roles. And so as women, we constantly feel this tension of, you know, wanting to please those out there while also nurturing this this home atmosphere right here.
Right.
I too grew up as a latchkey kid in the 80s. So I was familiar with a mother who worked. She was a nurse. She worked usually the swing shift and was never home when I came home. When I was newly married and after I had my first baby, I was still teaching in the classroom. And I got to the point where I felt like I was giving all my best to other people's children.
Yeah.
And then had very little. I was giving my daughter really the scraps at the end of the day. And that's probably not completely accurate. That was just how I felt.
Right.
I knew that I had more to give and wanted to give my very best to the people that mattered most. But therein is the struggle of every woman. I don't know that there's necessarily an easy answer.
Right.
Something that has helped me is, you know, women. I'm just going to speak to the women because I am a woman. I'm sure as a man, you can relate in your own ways. But as women, we want to be all to all, but we forget that only God is all. And that really is the key to our overwhelm, because I think overwhelm is a good indicator of misaligned priorities. And I'm not saying a woman's desire to work outside the home is misaligned. I think that God has equipped and gifted women to do things out there in the world and to push back on the darkness that Satan is spreading out there in the world. But we constantly, as I said before, have to live in the tension of like, our priorities right here. So when we're thinking about as women what our priorities should be and how we should tier level, we often think of like, I have many plates to spin. And that is true. And I'm sure you can say the same as a man. You have many plates that you're spinning. But would you agree with me that those plates that you're spinning aren't all the same?
Right.
Or carry the same weight?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I like to look at it like, okay, I have many plates that I'm spinning, but some of them are like china plates. And if those things drop, they're irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And those should be my highest priority. There are other plates that other responsibilities that I have in my life that I would call glass plates, or more maybe porcelain or clay plates. They will break. I can glue them back together. They're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be like they were, but they'll still be usable. I also have some plastic plates that I'm spinning and paper plates because I have different degrees of importance for all my responsibilities. And if I can actually list out all the things that I am responsible for in my life and begin acknowledging, okay, this is a china plate. This is a porcelain plate. This is a plastic plate. I will begin to see what things, especially during overwhelming seasons, those acutely overwhelming seasons, what things can I set aside or put down or lay down or even let drop? And I'm still going to be mindful and careful of the things that matter most. And I think so many women don't acknowledge the fact that their responsibilities aren't all the same. They just want to spin them all the same.
Well, there's a real fear, I think, of dropping any of the plates.
Yes.
And I love that you give permission for that. Like, it's okay for some of them to drop. Because you know what? It's a paper plate. You can just, that's our preferred china, by the way.
That's all right.
But you can pick it back up and it's fine.
That's right.
Because other things take priority.
And that sometimes it's just for a season where you are. I have been in some very acute seasons of overwhelm in my life where,
right.
and I'll say this, the cream really does rise to the top. When you are in a season where you feel like you're drowning, something that seemed oh so important yesterday suddenly doesn't feel quite so important. And you can give laser focus then to the things that really do matter when you acknowledge, oh, that thing doesn't matter. I'm going to have to set it aside.
Yeah. And I love the fact that it can be for a season.
Yeah.
That I think that's liberating to be able to say, all of these don't have to spend all at the same time with all the same emphasis and all the same priority forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
There are times where you prioritize, you reprioritize. It seems like a constant thing, right? A constant reprioritization. There's a couple of things that are obviously going to take the forefront from here on out.
And should.
Yeah.
Yep.
But besides that, you can reprioritize. I can't say that word. Reprioritize. I'd love you've hinted at this, and I'd love for you to kind of speak a little bit to the mental load that a lot of women carry. As a man, my wife and I, we try to keep lines of communication open. We aren't perfect at this, but we're getting better. And she's been able to explain to me a lot of this mental load. There's just always this concept of things that aren't done. A lot of times, for example, this is a good illustration. She'll tell me that the house needs to be cleaned. Okay, well, I'm going to straighten things, and I'm going to feel like I've cleaned the house.
Yeah.
And then she's going to come in and say, well, okay, well, we've got a lot of work to do. And I'm thinking, well, what are you talking about? Everything's done. No, this needs to be done. This needs to be done. There's this constant mental load that she carries, and I think a lot of women carry. It's just all the things that are in need of attention.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that mental load and really how it impacts a woman and how it impacts a mom as she goes about her day?
Well, let's back up the tape for a second and talk about when a woman is taking on a new responsibility. One thing that we often forget as women that the responsibility is one thing. The mental load that we will carry thinking about that thing, planning the details of, mapping it out before it actually has to be done. And we'll cycle through that multiple times in our brain, even before the thing is started. We don't often think about that mental load. And so whenever we as women are giving a yes to something, what we need to do is we need to sweep the corners of that yes, meaning drag out every possible part of mental load, our analysis paralysis that we will give, because that too is a part of the yes that you're giving, and you have to add it into the time frame. I might say volunteering for that, baseball yard sale is only going to be an hour on a Saturday, but actually it's so much more than that. And I have to account for all that extra mental load. Apart from that, once you've already said yes to the thing, now you're dealing with the mental load. I think oftentimes as women, we just need a container to put all those thoughts in. And it's as simple as writing it down and setting it down.
Yeah.
Because science does show us when we actually, physically write something down and lay it aside, it is like putting it into a container. And I know that seems so easy and trite to say, but sometimes that's what we really need to do. Write it down and say, I'm going to revisit that. And then also to give that a space or a day. For instance, I don't like to disjoint my days and be running here, there, and everywhere on every day. I give one day a week. I assign one day a week as my check all the boxes, run all the errands.
Yeah.
So on Monday, let's say I find a library book that's 3 weeks overdue. I might feel the pressure to want to run it to the library, but that's going to really disjoint my day. Instead, I say, okay, Tuesdays are my errand day. I'm going to add that to my Tuesday list. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to set it down and not think of it again.
I love that. And I've read a couple books lately from some people way smarter than me, but that is so important. And I found that to be true in my life as well. Writing things down, there is this loop that goes on in our mind. And if as long as it stays in our mind, we feel this pressure. We feel this load where we've got to remember it, and we've got to remember it at the right time, and all of this stuff that goes along with it. But the minute you write it down, it closes that loop.
Yeah.
And it's like this subconscious brain of yours that's just going hyperactive, trying to think about all the things. Well, now it can settle down. And now it can check that off, because now, it may not be solved, but it's at least written down and it's out of your head.
You won't forget it.
Yeah.
And can I just add to that? Resist the urge to write it down on your phone.
Yeah.
Whenever possible, analog your life whenever you can, because you might go to that, notes app that you have to write down, return the library book. But what happens when you click on your phone?
Something, notification.
Yep, you get a ping here, you see a light bulb flash on that other app or whatever. And anytime your thought gets interrupted, that's adding to your anxiousness, because now you have to remember what your previous thought was. And research shows us it takes you about 20 minutes, sometimes up to 20 minutes to think about what that last thing is. Now you've just lost 20 minutes of your life. You're even more behind. That only adds to your overwhelm. So in our cultural moment, we all want our lives on our phone, and we think that it's really streamlining, and that technology is, why wouldn't we want to latch onto this new technology that we have that generations before did not have? I would say you're doing yourself a disservice by putting your life on your phone. You're actually robbing yourself of life, because it's robbing yourself of minutes. It's also adding to your anxiety. So during acutely overwhelming seasons, especially, try to analog everything that you possibly can. Real paper, real pen.
I want to pause there a minute, because I think you hit on something that's really, really important. Analog everything when you can.
Yeah.
I find that really, really wise. I find that really wise. And here's why. Because I think that, and I find it true in myself, and there's, again, people way smarter than me that have kind of done some work in this. But it is very, very distracting to try to live a life digitally. I've had conversations on the podcast with people about digital lifestyles, and you were, especially ADD minds like myself, I go chasing squirrels like crazy when I pull up my phone. And I think probably a lot of us have that tendency. And that's the reason the phone has notifications, to interrupt you and to bring your attention to whatever it wants to get your attention about. That's why you have all of these notifications from the apps. And so, why not download the latest app that allows you to do all this productivity stuff? And it highlights itself about being, helping you become more efficient. But in reality, it probably slows you down. That truth about it takes you about 20 minutes to come back to that original thought. Think about how much wasted time that is for someone who's already short on time.
Yeah.
I find that extremely wise. And so I'd love to kind of pause there a minute and just talk about, hey, why is that, do you think? Technology is wonderful. We're having this conversation by technology, maybe not on your preferred microphone, but you love it and you hate it. We have some positive things and negative things that have come out of it, but there's a real tendency to really get in over our heads because of the way technology has evolved through the years. What's your experience with that? Outside of just the whole analog yourself, analog your life. Can we talk a little more about that? Because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us struggle with FOMO when it comes to things online. So there's that. Our anxiousness increases because of that. I can give you all kinds of research and data, and I'm sure you've read as well, what our digital lives and our digital spaces are doing to our mental load. Research shows that every time you pick up your phone, even when you think you're just doing one quick thing, I'm just sending answering that one email, or I'm just sending a text, you spend about 20 more minutes on your phone than you expected to. And when you add that up through a week's time, for women, it's about 4 hours a day. For a week's time, that's 24 hours a day. Imagine, Chad, if I could just hand you, a free 24 hours in your week. Wouldn't that be wonderful to do with however you want it? Maybe dig yourself out of some of the overwhelm you hear. But let's set that research aside for a second. And let me just give you some anecdotal experience. So I was a teacher in the classroom, right? And in my classroom, I tried to make calming spaces. I didn't like noisy toys. And part of my years in the classroom, was a preschool, and and later a kindergarten teacher. So
Bless
instead
you.
of noisy toys, I wanted calming toys. I wanted calming colors, neutral colors. Think back to your childhood. Did you watch Mr. Rogers when you were little?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mr. Rogers was known for what?
Peace. He was calm. He was. There's a real sense of organization, and just that's what it was for me.
Yeah, he talked very slowly.
Yeah.
And quietly almost. You almost had to lean in sometimes to hear him. There wasn't a lot of bright, flashy things. He went back to the rudimentary toys of yesteryear, puppets and songs and finger plays. And that was very intentional because he was speaking to children in a time where everything was neon colored, the 80s and early 90s, neon colored, flashy, loud, things zooming across the screen. And we know that those types of things add to our anxiety. So then seeing this Mr. Rogers on the screen, this very calming, peaceful, we were all drawn to him in surprising, compelling ways. That's my anecdotal evidence for you about what our phones are doing. If you can think of your phone as that, Saturday morning cartoon that's just like flashing things at you, kind of giving you a migraine. And then especially if you have, ADD or ADHD, adding to that chaos in your brain versus analoging your life is slow and quiet. It allows for pauses of breath and pauses of thought.
Yeah.
And we need more of that.
The word that comes to mind is pace. I think that has to do with our pace of life.
Yeah.
And our pace is so fast. There's a lot better words, but we'll say that. Our pace is so fast these days. We need those moments of pause.
Yeah.
We need those moments of stillness and peace and quiet. And I think analoging our life best we can. So all right, I have a Kindle. I still love paper books.
Yeah.
You can't see here, but I'm in a library. I mean, I've got books everywhere. I have a book problem, but that's okay. And I don't like to keep an electronic calendar. I like to keep a calendar that I can write in. Maybe call me old school. That's fine. But I love those moments of analog where I can just kind of sit and think, and it's not always on a flashing and glowing screen. There's peace in that, I think. And so,
because when your pace is fast on a screen, you have a tendency to feel busy and therefore overwhelmed, even when you're not.
And rushed. Yeah.
Yes, because everything feels so rushed. To a woman's perspective, some of the things that I would really suggest her analoging, and I realize, I'm not calling people to be Luddites where we just stick our heads in the sand and pretend it's 1855.
Right.
That for most of us, that's not possible. And I recognize that. I mean, I do most of my ministry online. But for a woman, some things that I have found helpful that I can analog. One, write old-fashioned cards and letters instead of always sending text to your friends. Who doesn't like to receive good mail that's not junk or a bill, right? So whenever possible, write a card to a friend. Slow down enough to say the things that matter to the people that matter most. Instead of putting all your recipes on an app or some digital space, find them online if you must, but then print them out and store them in a book so that your kids aren't always seeing your face in a screen, because you might know that you're just getting a recipe online, but they don't always. And what do they see? Mom's face is always on a screen and never on them. So put your recipes in a binder, print them out, even handwrite them, because someday your children will love to see some of their favorite meals written in your own hand. I pay all my bills the old-fashioned way. Not always with a stamp, but sometimes. So I know where my money is going. And also, I too love a paper calendar. I know that those Starlight calendars, those digital wall calendars are all the rage right now. But again, that's just another flashing light in my face, robbing me of time.
Yeah, exactly. A couple things you said I'd like to dig into. Number one, your kids don't know that you're just looking for a recipe.
Yeah.
My wife and I will be sometimes amongst our kids, and usually her to me saying this, what you doing? and
Mm-hmm.
I'll be on my phone. Let's just have a confession time here. Not perfect. I try to do that less, but
Yeah.
sometimes I'm on it, and it's for a good reason. I'm like, oh, well, I'm doing this, and there's been times where in her motherly wisdom, she's reminded me the kids don't know that.
Yeah.
They just see that you're prioritizing a phone over them. That's maybe not the word she would use, but I think that's so true. And also, we're discipling them as to what's important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we want to disciple kids who aren't so overwhelmed and overstimulated, and really have this sense of peace and joy instead, then what are we showing them as important in our lives? Are we constantly on our phones for the little things?
Mm-hmm.
And there's times where we don't like quiet. I don't know that we know what to do with quiet sometimes, which tells me that we probably need more of it. But there's even times where I'm walking up the stairs and I'm going to be putting my kids down, and I'm like, oh, that's a good time to check my email. I'll just flip through it real quick. Those moments where we think it's insignificant, but we're modeling for our kids what's a priority. Is that something that you see as well?
Yeah, and I think you're in the years of parenting where your children, I don't know if they have phones yet or not. They don't. I would imagine in the next few years that responsibility will be passed to them.
Yeah.
And so you're not just modeling what's important to you in setting your phone down. You're actually modeling good behaviors
How
with
they
a
should
phone.
steward their
Healthy stewardship of a phone.
Yeah.
And we all, I think, as parents, know the value of real life playtime for our kids and undigital spaces, but we sometimes need to take our own advice because they are watching.
Yeah.
And does our walk match our talk about our own lives? Not always.
We try very hard to limit their screen time, and we call that tablets, TVs.
Sure.
And I'm convicted a lot of times that am I limiting my own screen time?
Yeah.
Setting that example. So it's just something throw out there. Hey, we don't have it figured out. We're not perfect, but it's something we struggle with, and something I think a lot of other people struggle with. And I think it's an area that we can improve. Switching gears a little bit, I want to go back to one of the things you said to start with, and it was this idea of unrealistic expectations. One of the things that you talked about was realizing that we can't be everything to everybody. That's what God is. We a lot of times have unrealistic expectations, whether that's our own self expectations or perhaps the expectations that society, family members, et cetera, have placed on us. Can you talk about those realistic expectations and how to handle some of that? How do we slow down and really set those realistic goals for ourselves?
Well, I think it goes back, and I talk about it in my book, it goes back to a verse in scripture, and I'd like to read it if I could.
Yeah, perfect.
I don't want to misquote it. It's 1 Thessalonians 4:11-12, and it reads this: "And to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, you should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody." So when we think of the context of that particular verse, Paul was writing in a Greco-Roman time, and work was actually looked on like a four-letter word. You don't work was the thing of peasants, and people didn't want to do that. The believers at that time, many of them were abandoning their posts or abandoning their work, assuming that Jesus was going to come back at any time. And so, why have this job? And he was saying, no, actually, the way you handle your work and the industry that God has given you is a way that you can show the world, hey, we're different. We're not milking off the system. We're not mooching off of each other. We actually are caring and tending for one another, but we're also doing two things. We're minding our own business and we're working with our hands. And that's really his twofold prescription for having the first part of that verse, which is a quiet life. And quiet there in the Greek actually translates peace and rest.
Wow.
And those two things are the very opposite of what I feel when I'm overwhelmed. But if
that's what we're after, isn't it?
Right, exactly. Yeah. But if God through Paul was saying, make it your ambition for this quiet life, this peace and rest, it's because peace and rest are possible.
Yeah.
If you mind your own business and work with your hands. And I think for women, that's where we get into the trouble. When you're talking about like figuring out what your priorities are, we as women are often overwhelmed, I think, for 3 reasons. And you might be able to say the same as a man. I'm not a man, so maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. I think we get overwhelmed first and foremost when we're not doing that first thing, when we're not minding our own business. You know, there are certain things in our life that God has given us as women to mind, but it's really easy when I'm already kind of feeling overwhelmed to just like binge Netflix at the end of the day and not actually do the dishes in the sink, or just assume, well, I don't need to make my bed because it's just going to get dirty again tomorrow. I'm just going to lay in it tonight. But what we need to remember is in not doing the things of today, we're not helping ourselves because those things will just avalanche into tomorrow. And now we have double the amount of work. Right. Well, no wonder we're overwhelmed. So one way to dig ourselves out of our overwhelm is just to be faithful and steadfast, as scripture says, to the everyday, run of the mill, boots on the ground parts of our lives. Sure. Will we do them all perfectly? No. Will we always be faithful at them? No, because we're fallen sinners. But to the best of our ability, when we mind our own business, we won't be so overwhelmed with those everyday parts.
Right.
I think the second way we get overwhelmed as women is we look at the business of everyone else and we think it's ours to take on.
That's not just women either.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Yeah. Like I see somebody, going back to being online, I see somebody, making homemade fruit snacks on Instagram. And I think to myself, well, maybe I should be doing that. And so I add that to my plate, forgetting that 1, that's not really something that God has called me to mind.
Right.
And 2, this woman who's making homemade fruit snacks on Instagram is showing me what she's doing, but she's not actually showing me what she's not doing.
Wow.
So there's many things she might not be doing. Maybe she does that really well. We all have what I like to call our awesome that God has given us, the gifts and talents that we excel in. And unfortunately, the petri dish of social media really only highlights the awesome. I have my own awesome. And in order to do that well, I have to be willing to say no to other things. So that's one part. Another part of our overwhelm is when we're not minding our own business, we're taking on the business of others.
Sure.
And then I think the third way that we get overwhelmed is during those really acute seasons of overwhelm where things, because we live in a fallen world, happen that are outside of our control. It's not because of something you said or did. It's not because of the way you're mismanaging the situation. It's because sin, death, and disease are reigning on this side of the garden until Christ comes home.
Right.
Or Christ brings us home. So there are certain things that I just have to say, Lord, this is outside of my control. And I'm going to open my iron fists of control and release this situation to you, assuming and knowing and trusting your word that in your care for me, I will not be consumed.
Yeah.
So often as women, we just like spin our wheels and we want to manage things that are not ours to manage. And that's when the overwhelm comes. That's our pride leads us to our destruction.
I love that because it shows me that as a man, women aren't that much different than we are. There's definitely unique perspectives, but I can resonate with all of those. There's this tendency to look on social media and the illustration I use to guys, I'm like, hey, I like my truck. Until I find my friend just got a brand new F-250, all the things. And I don't like my truck quite so much anymore.
That's right.
I want what he's got. And even like lifestyles and vacations. Yeah, you're seeing what they said yes to. You're not seeing what they said no to.
Yes. And every yes equals a no.
That's right.
Every single yes we give. And I think that's another reason. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I think that's one struggle that women for sure have. We struggle to say no Mostly because the opportunities that are presented to us are all good things. I mean,
Yeah.
rarely is somebody coming up to me saying, "Hey, will you sell these illegal drugs?" Right? It's always
Right.
good things, and I feel guilty perhaps to say, when I have to say no to that thing, but I always have to remember every yes I give to someone else's important something means I'm giving a no to maybe something I find important.
You could be saying yes to good,
Yeah.
but in return saying no to better or no to
Or
best.
best. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think too, getting back to those 3 types of overwhelm, if women can handle those first 2 components well, if I as a woman can be steadfast and faithful to the everyday tasks that God has given me, and then also put blinders on to the tasks that God has given other women and not feel the pressure to take that on myself. If I can manage those first 2 parts of overwhelm well, I leave enough room for when those acute seasons of overwhelm happen in my life. I can kind of set my life on autopilot because I've set up some good systems and routines for the mundane bits of the day. And then can give more concentrated effort and care and even time in the word and time in prayer for those times that are outside of my control. And I won't feel so overwhelmed. One more thing I would add to that. It has helped me over the years when I struggle to say no to something, to imagine my life like a bucket. And right now I have what I have in my bucket. These are all the parts of my life. But when something outside of my control happens in my life and now is all of a sudden in this bucket, if I can just remember the simple laws of physics that you actually can't put something into an already filled space without taking something out.
Yeah.
And when I remember that, it frees me up from feeling the guilt of having to let things go or feeling like a failure because I can't do all the things. Well, of course I can't fill my bucket with one more thing that it's already filled up. If it's a full bucket, something has to come out. That's the laws of physics.
Right.
I don't need to spend one iota of time feeling guilty about saying no to something.
Yeah. Really good illustration, and I think that's going to be really helpful to some ladies and some men out there. So relatable across the spectrum, I think. And so then I want to kind of switch the perspective a little bit. So you're speaking to women. How can we as men, how can we as husbands, how can we as fathers provide healthy support to our family through supporting our spouse who may be feeling overwhelmed in these moments?
That's a great question. One, I would say, listen for the things that she's not saying. Listen for the unsaid words. Oftentimes when a woman is, airing her laundry list of to-dos with frustration, and maybe she's spewing out a little venom and vitriol, unintended, and you just happen to be the person who's standing closest to her because you love her, so you're receiving all this. Listen to the words that she's not saying, and here's what they are. I'm a failure. I'm not doing this right. And that is something that looms. I know men struggle with that in their own way and for their own reasons, to be the providers, the fixers, the solvers. But women carry this emotional weight. And in our cultural moment, perfection is demanded of us. And any bit of variation from perfection, well, we stamp failure over the whole thing. So just be willing to affirm her, point out the things that she is doing so well. Maybe don't try to fix it all, because sometimes we're just saying out loud to the ethos all the things we have to do, and we're not looking for the perfect solution. Maybe if you're not sure, just be bold enough to say, "Hey, are you wanting help here or just a listening ear? I can offer both."
Clarifying question will go a long ways.
Yes. And then one simple thing, and perhaps your wife can relate to this as a mom who works outside the home. Just as much as you need like some downtime in your day when you're switching responsibilities. So when you're going from work back to home or home to work, you need a few minutes, 5-10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes to take off this hat and put on that one, cast off the emotional baggage of that one thing in order to reorient and re-enter this new space well. She needs the same. So your wife might have that as a working mom when she's driving home from the pharmacy or wherever she works back home. She has a little bit of time to slough that off. But if you're listening to this and your wife is a stay-at-home mom or a work-at-home mom, she needs that too. She needs to know that it's okay to reorient and re-enter, even if she never goes anyplace. And for me, when I was a young mom at home and I was just, I didn't work outside the home at that point, I needed like 15 minutes as soon as my husband walked in the door to just like put on some lip gloss and comb my hair so I could feel like a person again. And so that I wouldn't meet him at the door feeling like, a feral cat.
Yeah. Here, they're yours.
Raccoon. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So afford your wife that same like 10 minutes of leisure to reorient and restructure her mind, heart, and emotions, pivoting from one activity to the next.
Really wise words. And I haven't thought about some of that before. The idea of thinking that you're a failure if you're short of perfect, or if things aren't going well, kind of labeling yourself. And I think that's a tendency that maybe we all have, but being able to support your wife in that way, affirm her, really, really important. And then I'll also want to kind of hit on this as we wrap up. You said, if your wife is talking to you and you just happen to be the person that she's kind of, letting it out on.
Yeah.
We've all been there and we've all been on both sides of that.
Yeah.
Being emotionally aware enough to not just react in that situation.
But it's not about you. Recognizing it's not really aimed at you.
Yeah. But one of the things I tell guys is, you need to study your wife. I know that sounds weird. You need to know her. Like you need to I've heard one guy say it this way, you need to get a PhD in your wife. You need to know the way that she thinks and what makes her tick. And being able to realize, okay, I'm not going to take offense at that because that's just an indication that something's going on with her that's wrong.
Right.
And if I then say, oh, you didn't talk to me that way. No, you didn't. And then I start reacting and then I start giving it back to her. That's not helpful for anybody.
Right.
But
if you could
go ahead. I was leading into what you thought about that. So
I say the same thing to mothers of middle schoolers.
Yeah.
There is something to be said about you are a safe person to her.
Yeah.
You are a safe person to your wife. And where else is she going to air out her deep grief and deep hurt? And sometimes, admittedly, that comes out sideways and it lands wrong.
Yeah.
And if we are one anothering, as scripture calls us to, we will consider the best in each other.
Yeah.
And if we are, like you said, studying one another and knowing each other well, I would hope that my husband would give me the benefit of the doubt to say, okay, I don't think this has to do with me. I'm just standing close with my arms open wide to her. And so it's getting aimed at me. And hopefully I'm saying and thinking the same thing about him. There is this feeling of you're a safe person.
Yeah.
And so just side note, if you're a mother of middle schoolers, remember that too. And often the venom and vitriol that you receive has very little to do with you. You just happen to be the one who wants to stand the closest because you love them so much. And so you are the one it's aimed at because you feel safe to them.
Kind of the price you pay for being close and being the one that is showing that love. But we work through it together. And I'll just add this real quick too. As men, a lot of times we don't know what to do when our wife is emotional, when she's unloading some of this stuff. And there is this real tendency that we need to fix it. Okay, this is what's wrong. Here's what I see. What's the big deal? It's okay to not have the answers. And it's okay to just listen. And it's okay to just give her a hug and be that safe place. Want to encourage those guys out there that are listening. Hey, be that person for your spouse. Be that person that she can come to and she can know and she can be secure in, knowing that even on her worst of days, you've got her back. So, Jamie, this has been incredible. I've loved this conversation. So I just want to say thank you for leaning into your voice, leaning into your awesome, as you call it. God has equipped you and given you a lot of grace and gifts. So thanks for doing that. Where can my listeners find out more about you and your books and the work that you're doing?
Well, it has been a joy to be with you. Thank you so much for your hospitality behind the microphone.
Sure.
If you want to know more about where God has me and what I'm up to doing his work, you can go to jamieerickson.com. That's where you can find out about my books and my podcast and different places that I'm speaking at around the country.
Awesome. I'll put show notes. I'll put links in the show notes to that as well. And I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you
for having me.
Being a voice of reason and a voice of wisdom in the world that seems so confusing, and for bringing healing to our relationship. So bless you, Jamie. I pray the very best for you and your family. And thanks for being here on the RevRx podcast today.
Thank you so much.